Basically, it goes like this. No one was watching out for the interests of the people, and the people could increasingly see that this was the case. It was the financial crisis of 2008 that engraved this pattern, I think, permanently in the public mind. Every trusted professional group that touched on the mortgage industry had turned out to be corrupt. Real estate appraisers, remember? Real estate appraisers had puffed the housing bubble. Credit rating agencies had puffed Wall Street's trashy securities. And of course, the investment banks themselves had created financial instruments that were designed to destroy their clients. And then, of course, as the larger economy of the world spiraled earthward, and as millions of people around the world lost jobs and homes, the trusted professionals of our federal government stepped in to ensure that their brother professionals on Wall Street would suffer no ill effects. So for this generation, for our generation, the bailout of the crooks would stand as the ultimate demonstration of the worthlessness of institutions, the sort of nightmare knowledge that lurked behind every scam that was to come. And what I describe in Rendezvous with Oblivion is a vast panorama of such scams, a republic of ripoffs, if you will. Bernie Sanders, who's sort of the archetypal reform figure of our time, likes to say that the business model of Wall Street is fraud. But I think that in truth, we could say that about many of the designated protectors of our health and well-being. Pharmaceutical companies, for example, we learned that they jack up prices for no reason other than because they can, because it is their federally guaranteed right to do so. The brainpower of Silicon Valley, meanwhile, concentrates on the search for ingenious ways to harvest private information and build monopolies so that it too can gouge the world with impunity. Now in politics, of course, the scam and the fib are as old as the earth itself. And even so, these were years of extraordinary innovation in the field. The rise of the super PAC, the Citizens United decision, these drew the most attention in this regard. But what seems most striking now, looking back, is the way the casual dishonesty of politics started to spill over into everyday life. What I mean by that is that, now I'm going to get this thing open this time. The consolations of ideology were no longer the property of the pundit class. They were massified. They became available to the millions via Facebook and Twitter and the political entertainers on cable news. So millions of Americans came to believe that everything was political and that therefore everything was faked, that everyone was a false accuser, so why not accuse people falsely, that any complaint or grievance that you could come up with could ultimately be confounded by some clever meme, that they or their TV heroes had discovered the made-up argument by which they could drown out that still small voice of reality. Legitimate public defenders like newspapers were simply shutting down. And as your local paper went silent, which is a big problem in the part of the world that I come from, by the way, and as your local newspaper went silent, the reign of facticity seemed to crumble as well. Among the newspapers that survived, and there's basically only 2 or 3, depending on how you count it, that matter. Think about that for a second. In this country of 320 million people, we have 3 newspapers that matter. And everybody else in the media takes their, their talking points from those 3 papers. But among the, and there's really only 2 that matter, as we all know. The Wall Street Journal, my former employer, is something of an outlier. But among the 2 papers that mattered, the resident professionals sometimes seemed to be in complete denial about what was going on around them. This was a golden age of journalism, they chanted. And as their little world shrank and the public grew to hate them more and more, the survivors came together in an ever tighter circle of professional unanimity, agreeing with one another on the correct interpretation of an extraordinary variety of events. Fake news flourished, of course, and for every newspaper that withered away, an opportunity opened up for somebody willing to imitate what had gone before. Social media entrepreneurs of every description flourished, as did homegrown propagandists and online scam artists. And it sometimes felt as though everyone you knew was, search engine optimizing something, or making some sort of bogus documentary, or photoshopping, some outrageous text onto some stock photo they had found. And the internet teemed with collators of tweets, makers of memes, content farms, traffickers in panic and stereotype, liars for hire. Now, we all know this country has always been friendly to quacks and mountebanks and false accusers. I mean, that's who we are, right? But there's something different today. The quacks and the mountebanks, they own the place now. And everybody knows it. The con game today is our national pastime. Now, what has made all of this possible, the underlying condition that makes all this possible, is not a mystery. For most Americans, the props of middle-class life are growing expensive and out of reach. And at the same time that this is happening, the rewards that are showered on society's handful of winners have grown astronomically greater. We all know this, and the result is precisely what our cynical ancestors would have expected. People will do anything, and I mean anything, to be one of the winners.